You're listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, brought to you by Global Convenience Store Focus, featuring senior retail executives and experts in the global convenience, fuels, and mobility retail industry. Welcome to the Future of Convenience podcast. I'm Carolyn Schnare, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dan Munford. Hey, Dan.
Hello, Carolyn. Nice to see you again.
Fantastic to see you too. So, Dan, you know what I really figured out sets our show apart from others in this genre? It's our interviews with leaders, and we've had the opportunity to speak with some of the heaviest hitters in the mobility industry, and today is no different. We're going to talk with Jacob Schram, an esteemed and well-regarded leader in several companies, and I'm very excited to hear what he has to say.
Are you looking for a loyalty platform that drives real results? Liquid Barcodes is the leading loyalty and subscription platform for convenience retailers worldwide. From global brands like Circle K and 7-Eleven to innovators like Rebel Stores and H&S Energy, great convenience operators trust Liquid Barcodes to keep their customers coming back. Liquid Barcodes delivers the complete loyalty solution, making it easy to operate targeted and gamified loyalty programs with a fantastic user experience. With features like subscriptions, games, and advanced analytics, Liquid Barcodes helps operate a loyalty program and helps grow the business too. Learn more at liquidbarcodes.com.
So, Dan, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some warmer weather. But you're out there just seeing all the good things being out in the wilderness. So what have you been up to today?
Well, it's been a really interesting day, and it's going to get even more interesting when we get into this conversation with Jacob. But just to let you know what I've been doing this morning, BP have opened their first EV hub in London, where they've actually taken the fuel pumps out, and that's a new EV hub with Marks and Spencer's in West London. So we're in the sweet spot in the next few weeks where we'll be talking about a lot of new to industry EV hubs. So yeah, I visited a really interesting site this morning. So I'm just fresh from that. So it's a good moment to get into a conversation with Jacob, I'd say.
Oh, that's so cool. I can't wait to see more and hear more about that. So who do we have for us today?
So I'd like to welcome my friend Jacob Schram. Jacob, welcome. It's high time we caught up, isn't it?
It is actually, but good friendships never end, so it's easy to talk again.
Absolutely. Well, we have known each other many years, and obviously I've watched your career with interest. We've met, in lots of different places. Looks at lots of different things. In obviously looking across, the many roles you've had, and I guess I thought that was a good place to start. I mean, just thinking about the big businesses, and the big teams that you've worked with, Jacob, over the years, McDonald's, Statoil, Circle K, McKinsey, Norwegian, Muller, and today, you're in multiple board advisory roles, including, of course, Moeve, who I've been looking at closely recently. Perhaps you could start by just telling us a little bit about how you, looking at some of those experiences, how you felt you've developed personally in those businesses and those big brands have developed you as an individual over the last few years.
Yeah, first of all, I have to say it's incredible to say it actually, but it's been 35 years in business, and I don't feel that old, to be honest. But I think that period has been characterized by two things. It's been a lot of fun, and secondly, it's also been a lot of hard work. And I think that goes along. You have to be prepared to work hard, but it's hopeless to work hard if you don't have fun. So luckily, I have had a lot of fun, which has kind of been my fuel of doing this. And then I also want to say that what's kind of given me the inspiration to continue is also maybe two things. First of all, it's not a lonely role. Whatever you achieve along your career path has more or less always been team achievements. To do a lot of things together with the team, going through troubles with the team, going through ups, going through downs, but then at the end achieving, if it was a result or some specific activities, etc. That has been the one driver. And the other driver, I think, is more part of my DNA. It's the curiosity. I always been curious and wanted to learn, wanted to experiment with things, etc. And I think that's especially when you're getting older, the curiosity is super important to keep you going. So I'm feeling that I'm still learning in my age now, and I learned every day. And then to do that, I think it's super important that you have the eagerness to listen, having bigger ears than mouth. So eagerness to listen, and even listen to what you define maybe as your enemies, your competitors, people that you not always don't agree with. It's actually an art having the ability to listen. And the older I get, I feel it's more important to listen than the other way.
That is some sage advice I think a lot of people could stand to hear these days. So one of the things that just really looking at your background, looking at all the fabulous different industries that you've been in, what's your secret sauce to leading at team besides listening? And in addition to that, but adapting to survive in a world that's just changing at breakneck speeds?
I think as a top leader, or working either within a top management group or as a top leader, as a CEO, I think to succeed in a company, I think again, it's not a one-man show. You really have to have the level 1, 2, 3, and maybe level 4 in a company among leaders to move in the same direction. It's when you get all the leaders to move in the same direction, then that's the time when magic happens. So to do that, I think you need to develop what I call a one leadership language. Everyone has to think the same about leadership, has to have the same philosophy about leadership, etc. Because then what you achieve is speed and alignment. We all know that a company with a lot of speed and no alignment, things stand still, and the other way around, if you have a lot of alignment but not enough speed, it doesn't help. Then the others pass you. So I think that's very important, and that's why I wrote my book with the 4 chapters: leading results, leading strategy, leading execution, and leading people. I think more or less every theme within leadership you can hook up to those 4 pillars. So that's one thing. And that's probably the most difficult as a C-level leader, to get the top part of a company, the majority of top leaders moving in the same direction. And in addition to what I mentioned now, I think you have to solve especially to solve one thing to get alignment and speed, and you have to solve kind of the art of collaboration within the company. And we know that could be super difficult in big companies. You might have matrix organizations, you might have different interests, etc. So having forceful debates is important. But then also, when there has been made a decision, it's super important that everyone commits to that, even if you was against it in the start. So you have to discuss, but at the end you have to make a decision, and when you have made a decision, you have to commit to it. That's one thing. The other thing is that you have to be extremely good in this complex environment that we are now, to focus and prioritize.
I think that frames it, the next sort of big talking point really well, Jacob, in that obviously looking across the different businesses that you've worked in, you know, I guess the background to a lot of the time in many of the companies that you've been in, and some of the challenges in terms of aligning the company into a new strategy, new direction. The energy transition is sitting behind a lot of what we do in our lives in the last in the last decade, particularly, isn't it? And I guess it does put it. Just before we get into where we are with the energy transition, it does produce some big conflicts and some big challenges within business, doesn't it? In terms of re-engineering businesses and redirecting them towards the future at the same time as preserving the existing business.
Yeah, exactly. I used to say that you have to run the business on 2 clock speeds. And the whole idea and philosophy with that is that the current business you have most likely makes all your cash flow. And the cash flow is super important to survive. But if you, at the time you are focusing on current business, don't have the ability to imagine what's the future business, then at some point of time your current business will go down, and then you don't have anything for the future, and then your cash flow goes down as well. So it must be possible in a company to survive long term, that you both optimize your current business and at the same time you focus on building the new business. And I think the best example I have from my own life is when we were 100% focused on the fuel business. And that was a huge cash flow business and still is. And then suddenly something appeared called electric cars, which we know everyone knows what that is, and we kind of starting to embrace it. But when that starts, I remember I had a huge discussion in my own organization, Circle K, that a lot of the leaders said, Jacob, we can't involve in this because that will kill our current business. We will cannibalize the business. And others said, no, we should really focus on this new thing. It's super important. And the truth is that while we're optimizing the current business, I used to say, I really want to sell the last drop of fuel. But at the same time, I want to develop the future with electric cars, because Circle K is going to be the place that has the best charging network. Because as long as the cars is driving on 4 wheels and not flying, we should be the go-to place for cars. Whether it's fuel or electrics or something else, we just have to go along with this. So I think that's kind of the best example I have of focusing, building the future business, and then at the same time focusing on current business, which at that point of time was the fuel. And if we hadn't done that, Circle K would never have the position they have, at least in Scandinavia today, with the number one position on charging for electric vehicles.
Absolutely, and maybe obviously I've lived that transition, not to the extent that you have, Jacob, but obviously as an observer, as a researcher, and from a media perspective in our sector. Where do you think we are today, in terms of where the discussion is in Europe, for instance, and perhaps other markets in terms of the energy transition? Is there still the sort of dichotomy of views within businesses, do you think, or are things becoming clearer, in terms of what's happening today, where we've got to in the energy transition in our particular sector? Well, when I say that, I'm obviously looking at thinking particularly about roadside retail and transportation.
Yeah, I don't think things are becoming clearer. I think it's even more difficult, also because the maturity for one energy source or the other is very different per country, and I will give you a couple of examples of that. The other thing is, since I was part of Statoil back in the 90s, I remember back in the 90s we were discussing about peak oil. Peak oil is almost coming next year. But I looked on the statistics yesterday and I saw that if you take thousands of barrels of oil production. I mean, the biggest year was 2023, and it seems that we're going even further in 2024. So when is really peak oil? When will we not be dependent on fuel or oil anymore? Question mark. I'm not sure it will happen as fast as many things. I think we will have to, whether we like it or not, to live with fuel many years going ahead. So that's one thing. When we're talking about EV charging, as I mentioned, very big difference between countries. Norway ahead of most countries, almost 100% of new cars now sold is EV cars, 20% of the car fleet. But as you mentioned in your introduction, I'm also working with the oil company, or the company, energy company Moeve, previous Cepsa in Spain. And in Spain, only 1.1% of new cars are electric cars. And what we see there, because I worked a lot with the retail there, is that it's the main reason for EV cars not selling that much in Spain is because consumers are afraid there is not a big enough charging network. And the challenge is the charging network, working together with Moeve. And why is that? It's not because Moeve, as an example, don't want to invest in it. It's simply because permitting takes so long time. And why does permitting take a long time? It takes a long time because the grid capacity is a challenge. So the authorities are very cautious about giving permissions. So it's a little bit like the hen and the egg, what comes first, etc. So in Spain it goes much slower. In Germany we saw the EV sales going down 37% in July 24 versus 23 because they removed the incentives, etc. But now they're taking it back again. So I think we will have to live for a long time with consumers preferring fuel cars over EVs before we kind of solve the infrastructure problems from a political point of view. And the last thing I want to mention in energy transition is I will not be surprised if we will have e-fuel might come in as a joker here, that we will go back to liquid fuel for some extent because they will develop much more environmental friendly fuel, zero emission fuel, etc. And I think the German car industry will be super interested in that because they have not succeeded in producing electric cars. That's kind of China. So they are really good at combustion engines, and I think there's a lot of political forces dragging one way or the other. But it will be a mix between regular fuel, EVs, and maybe e-fuel coming in as a joker. That's my bet.
Well, and I think it's pretty much about the same thing here. It is the same thing here in the U.S. We've got the same grid problems and permitting problems, and among other things. But one of the things that are standing out are hybrid vehicles over here in the U.S. Anyway, they're saying that might be one of the way to slowly get everybody there. The hybrid electric internal combustion engines. Do you agree with that as well?
Yeah, we saw that in the early days in Norway when EVs started to pick up market share. And then it went quite fast from hybrid cars to 100% electric cars. And that might be because we didn't have kind of the same challenges on the grids and permitting. So it was very fast rollout of the charging network, etc. But I guess the hybrid car is probably good if you have range anxiety. And the reason you have range anxiety is because you don't have a good enough charging network. So yes, I believe it's a good transition towards EVs, starting with hybrids.
Baby steps.
Exactly.
Jacob, just in terms of, obviously our role at Insight Research and Global Convenience Store Focus is to try and choose and carefully select, the big trends that our industry, is on. And, I guess we're looking at the needs of the, the needs of the industry in the future. And obviously, electric mobility has been one of those that we focused on for some time. The other two that were really there's one sort of other one which we focused on for a while, which I think is probably even more important, which we would term food venience. And then the third one, which is coming up the tracks really fast, is obviously looking at AI and how that can help in all kinds of different ways with convenience store food service operations as well. Just looking at the future of roadside and convenience retail. Do you think it makes sense to focus on let's talk about food venience first, in terms of that's a big trend that is very clear for our industry, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously, I would say anything that you could put under the umbrella convenience, meaning to-go things, I think belongs to roadside retail. But before we kind of discuss a little bit deeper, maybe on food convenience and the other things, is I want to roll a little bit back. And if you ask me the question, how do you win in future retail? I'll go back to actually a small part I wrote in my book back in 2016. And then I had kind of a model with the 5 dots or 5 circles. And I said 3 of them are pretty easy to copy, and 2 of them are difficult to copy. And we all know if you want to get sustainable competitive advantage, you really want to perfect on things that are difficult to copy. But the easy to copy is, in my view, if you are a good company and you're following the trends, you have good people, etc. The easy thing to copy is formats and concept as the first one. Secondly, it's always easy to copy technology. And thirdly, it's always easy to copy products, price, promotion. I remember especially we saw that when we introduced Statoil Fuel and Retail into Russia, into St. Petersburg. I mean, we're talking weeks, and then we saw almost a total copy of Statoil Fuel and Retail on with some of the Russian fuel retailers. So that's the easy part to copy, although of course there's a lot of difficulties in that also. But what I think will differ the winners of fuel retail is the 2 things that are difficult to copy. It is great people, that you really have great staff out there and great people at the service office. And that becomes more and more difficult to get those people, and also not only to get them, but to retain them in the company. And the second part, which is super difficult to copy, which I have huge respect for, having running a chain with 3,000 stores, and that is great operation. It's easy to run one station really good, maybe 10, but it's super difficult to run 100, several hundreds or thousands of stations with great operations all the way. And that's really the 2 things that differ a great chain that will survive over time compared to others that have new technology, really good at concepts, really good at products, etc. Because very often you see these companies as a fade. They introduce something new, have very special things, and then they fade out. Then they are not persistent. They don't have the right people. They don't have the great operation that makes it last.
No, I think that's such a good way of looking at the industry. I mean, do you feel optimistic about, given all that we've said today? I mean, Jacob, do you feel optimistic about the future?
Yeah, 100%. I think, to be honest, I think whatever society we develop, there will always be room for retail. Always, because people are more and more on the go. People demand fast solutions, but people not only demand fast solutions, they develop They demand quality in the fast solutions they get. And that's why I'm saying the two other things, people and operation, because if you are a retailer that are able to give great operation with great people, then you also deliver quality in the products that always have to change depending on what the demand is in the market and among customers.
Well, that is, like I said before, some really great advice, and that it probably included in the your book, which is The Essence of Business, which I know you can find it on Amazon. Is there anywhere else that people can look?
There is some bookstores in Norway, one called ARK, where we can online ordering. Absolutely.
Very cool. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes with a link. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your busy schedule to share those messages with us.
My pleasure. Always nice to talk to you, and always nice to talk about the industry of retail, which is really close to my heart.
Thank you so much, Jacob. And look, we have to catch up face to face soon. I hope that happens.
Absolutely. Looking forward to see you.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much. It's been a fantastic discussion. It's been great hearing about your journey and also your leadership and life tips that you've given us today. So listeners, if you haven't already, take a moment and hit that subscribe button right there on your podcast player so you can get the latest and greatest episodes as they drop. And if you'd be so kind, go ahead and tap the 5th star on that 5-star rating and leave us some love in the review area too. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us when you know every episode drops every other Tuesday. And lastly, take care of yourselves and thank you for listening to The Future of Convenience. You've been listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, produced by Dan Munford, Nick Scherzer, Jenna Ferguson, and Lorraine Evans. It is produced, edited, and mixed by Carolyn Schnare, and music is provided by Jukebox Music. Learn more at globalconveniencestorefocus.co.uk.